We wanted to explain that there is a quantum economy today. One of the ways that we did that was by putting out this report, which gives some data-based statistics on the numbers of companies, the numbers of jobs, the number of patents, the investments that are being made. And based on survey responses, we have been tracking the quantum computing market. And it's roughly 27% annual growth rate over the last 5 years. Growth has been outpacing the conservative estimates of the industry itself.
Quantum computing and sensing are emerging markets, but they're already worth well over $1 billion. How's growth looking? Some trends may surprise you, including a shift to on-prem quantum computers. Has AI really stolen quantum's thunder? Or is it about to synergistically help our industry and qubit counts grow? We look at solid global research in this episode of the Post-Quantum World. I'm your host, Konstantinos Karagiannis. I lead quantum computing services at Protiviti, where we're helping companies prepare for the benefits and threats of this exploding field. I hope you'll join each episode as we explore the technology and business impacts of this post-quantum era. Our guest today is the Executive Director of QED-C, Celia Merzbacher. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
Yeah, it's terrific having you on. And as we're recording this episode, you just testified before the House Science Committee. So before we get into anything else, I just want to ask, what was that like? That must have been intense.
I have done that once before, and it's sort of like your graduate school exams or something. They can ask you anything, and so you try to prepare for questions that you might get. But sometimes the mood of the day or the news of the day enters into the conversation, and generally, quantum is not a partisan topic. And so it was, I would say, a positive and friendly conversation that was had, and a first step or a next step in hopefully reauthorizing the National Quantum Initiative Act. So we'll see if something comes from that.
Yes, and that's, of course, what Trump put into place last time around. So we've all been hopeful that, like, no matter who won this presidency, quantum would remain kind of unchanged, right? Because both presidencies seem to have a pro-quantum stance. So fingers crossed, because obviously there's some funding issues with different branches of science. So what's your feel on that? Do you think it's all looking secure?
The signs are positive. Mm-hmm. And in the so-called skinny budget that came out last week, there was a lot of detail that was not there, but in both the National Science Foundation and the Department of Energy's Office of Science budget descriptions, it mentioned that there should be a focus, or they should sustain their investments in quantum. So it seems that quantum is among a few priorities that are being preserved, and hopefully that's going to be followed through. But we'll see. And Congress, always takes the proposed budget as a starting place and goes from there. So there's a bit of, what will happen between now and the actual budgets to be determined.
Yeah, it feels like there's only two topics Congress discusses. They're not political. It's quantum and UAPs. So assuming they didn't ask you about little green men or anything like that, then you were probably at the quantum one. Like those are the only two topics.
Well, there was an AI hearing at the same time on the Senate side with Sam Altman testifying. So once again, AI sort of overshadowed quantum.
Yes. That's been the story ever since ChatGPT's explosion, right? It's been kind of stealing the thunder. But I think we're catching up. I think we're getting back to a good level here. Until the machines take over and everything I said is just erased from history. So on that topic, actually, funny you should mention AI, because that'll be one of the first things we talk about. You want to just tell our listeners real quick what QED-C is before we dive into some of the reports coming out?
Yes, thanks. QED-C is a consortium of stakeholders. It was actually called for by Congress in the act, the National Quantum Initiative Act that was signed in 2018. And in there, it said that NIST in the Department of Commerce, that's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, was to establish such a consortium. And if you go and read what the consortium was to do, it was to do some assessment of what research is needed in order to reach a quantum-enabled future and identify gaps and strategies for filling the gaps. So we were chosen, we meaning SRI, the company I work for, was selected to establish and then manage this new consortium. So the Quantum Economic Development Consortium is that consortium that was called for. And I was hired around that time to be part of the team that created from nothing the new organization. And here we are in 2025. We've got about 230 members today, non-government members, who pay annually into the consortium and participate actively. And we've built a trusted community that includes representatives from across the entire ecosystem, including universities and research institutes, but primarily about 70% of the members are corporate members, and about 3/4 of those are small or mid-sized or startups companies. So we're really heavy on the number of companies anyhow in the small startup innovation space. Now we do have among our members the big companies that are investing in quantum like Google and IBM and NVIDIA and others. I don't want to leave any out, but you can see all of our members on our website. I will just point out that there are no big quantum companies today. The big companies that are doing quantum have a sort of quantum startup inside, and they behave rather differently from the parent in some ways. And so it's a sort of interesting dynamic within the consortium among all these different stakeholders, because there's a lot of growth, because there are a lot of common gaps that need to be addressed. It's quite collaborative, and I've been really pleased to see the amount of working together that's taking place in the consortium. And we do a lot of the gaps that we try to identify range from technology gaps to workforce gaps to standards gaps. Anything that might stand in the way of enabling and growing the quantum economy falls under our purview. So it's a broad mission, and so it's exciting to kind of help move things forward, and it's very much driven by what the members say they need most.
Yeah, there's like a couple of organizations that if you're doing business, especially in the US, you should know about. One is Chicago Quantum Exchange, and the other is QED-C. Like right now, I mean, like a lot of folks here should really be aware of that. I'm surprised when someone doesn't know about it.
Let me just add to that list, Elevate Quantum in the Denver and Boulder area.
Yeah. I should have added because I actually had them on. So I should have said that too. No, these organizations are important. And I get that whole model of being part of a big company, but quantum's just a piece of it. That's literally what I'm part of. Protiviti is sort of like the big 4.5, like big global consulting firm. We do everything, but there's my quantum practice nestled into that. Yeah. So I definitely get the approach. And for listeners, you get a 10% discount on QED-C. I'm just kidding. I just always want to say with code post quantum world. Yeah. On checkout. Yeah, no. But it is an important organization. So I'm very happy to have you on. And your team has been just publishing like crazy. We've got like 3 major reports that have been released within a short period of time. I wanted to start with the AI and quantum computing one. There's just a lot of there. And something that keeps coming up, I could be doing a talk about pretty much anything. I could be doing a talk about post-quantum cryptography, whatever. And I'm still going to get a question from someone at the talk on, but what happens when quantum and AI meet? What happens when you run AI and quantum? That question comes up all the time. I like to joke that maybe that's because of the Joe Rogan podcast, because like he mentions that like 3 times an episode. I get alerted pretty much every time it happens. And it's entered this like zeitgeist, right? Everyone's talking about that. So before we dig into like some of the findings, like what do you view as the synergies between quantum computing and AI that are kind of highlighted there?
So I love that QED-C is such a big community because we can pull together the experts in any area. And we did do a workshop at the end of last year, and there's a report that's available freely on our website on just this topic, use cases of quantum and AI, or sort of the interface of quantum and AI. And we approached it from sort of as a scientist or an engineer would. What does quantum computing mean for AI? What does AI mean for quantum computing? And what might happen at the sort of hybridization or fusion of these two working together somehow? And I think those are all likely to have important implications in the future. So quantum computing. Well, let's start with the AI for quantum. So AI is here today in some sense, and it's being used widely for things like software code writing, right, for classical computers. And so one can envision that the things that AI is being used for in classical computing could translate in some way, shape, or form to quantum computing. So there might be architecture, informed architecture design, or development of algorithms, or at least sort of concepts for algorithms, or even writing code for quantum computers. So that's sort of the AI for quantum computing direction. Quantum computing could, once quantum computers are more powerful, do things like be a source of generated data that could be used to train AI. Some AI model training is sort of limited by access to good data or clean data or well-structured data. So maybe quantum computing could be a source of training material for AI. There's also a lot of interest in whether or not quantum computing will help to somehow mitigate the resource requirements for running AI on classical computers. So as everybody knows, it's a big, energy demand to train models and to use AI. And so that's a certainly open area for exploration and research to determine whether or not using quantum computing in combination with classical could improve that requirement for AI. And then there's the fusion. How could learning models or AI in general benefit from being really hybridized with quantum computing, and the sort of joint development, co-design, if you will, of the two for each other's purposes is really, that would be kind of probably the longest term or longest time horizon, but equally impactful potentially. And so all of this is described in the report, along with some recommendations for where we are now. What should we do now? Well, I think this is where getting the communities, the research communities, which are sometimes rather stovepiped by the funding agencies that fund them and so on, let's kind of create some multidisciplinary programs where those communities are brought together.
Both technologies exist in a stack, right? Like, so quantum computing is a stack, AI is a stack. You've got all sorts of levels. In quantum, you have your abstraction layers of coding and everything below that until you get down to the final calls that are made out to the machine modality of whatever type. Companies like Q-Control interject in there to use AI to suppress noise, suppress errors, things like that. So it will be interesting to see, can quantum fit into that stack on AI side too? What can happen? Multiple levels of synergy. I just like to highlight for folks that it's not some magic switch, just like quantum's not going to replace classical computers. It's also not going to replace the entire AI world. It's not just going to be oh, now that AI runs on quantum, we're good. That was the thing we needed for artificial general intelligence or something.
And that's a really important thing to underscore, that it's not quantum or AI, it's quantum and AI, really.
Yeah, there'll be some synergies. Now, because there's been an interest in each separately in the government, right? Do you think that there needs to be something more done to bring that together? Some kind of federal support for the two together?
Absolutely. I think that's a top recommendation because it's not sort of natural. And so somehow, either through strategic planning within an agency, like the National Science Foundation a number of years ago now, did some deep thinking and looking ahead and came up with 10 big ideas, they called them, I think. And they were just areas where they saw opportunity in the next phase of their research investments. And they wanted to just sort of have those diffuse into their various programs. And I think it was quite successful. Quantum was one of them, quantum information science and technology or something. And so they could renew that, and they might come up with some opportunities that would be added, or a new list, and that can sort of be used as motivation for the more discipline-based programs to look for opportunities to come together. If something is going to be favored because it addresses something on this strategic list, and whether that list comes from within an agency or from OSTP or something, it can work either way. But it often is helpful to have some strategy document that motivates the machinery of the agencies to work together. And I think that's what's probably needed in this case.
One thing that might not be helping quantum right now is that AI, let's face it, nabs onto that fear angle really, really strongly. With quantum, originally you can argue it was developed, a lot of money was thrown in it because of the fear of cracking encryption. Like, oh, we got to get there first. That became that arms race. But now that doesn't even matter so much because we have the path towards post-quantum cryptography and we're going to go on it no matter what. But with AI, it's every time there's a Senate hearing or something, you hear the same things. It's like, if China gets this first, that's it. We're not even able to deal with them. It'll be a thing that we can't understand. It'll be an opponent who's so smart we can't even fight with it. That kind of fear thing. Is there something like that we need to be doing on the quantum side? I don't know. Is there some angle, some hook? Not to fearmonger, but just to point out that there are some stakes of losing in this game too. Is there something we're not doing?
At the hearing yesterday, I sensed that was a sort of looming threat or fear that we don't want to come in second to China in particular. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't only because of the potential for being able to, decrypt protected information, but the idea that the quantum technologies are dual use, that quantum sensors and other technologies have national interests or applications that are relevant to national security. It's pretty clear that the policymakers feel that is true. And Defense Department is investing in quantum sensors pretty strongly, as well as quantum computing. And so I think it's a little bit more nuanced. The threat posed by China being the first to market, in addition to the whole economic benefits that would flow from that as well.
Yeah, because people have to remember the use cases where quantum is better, it's going to be a lot better. It won't even be, and there'll be zero comparison really. So that just needs to get some attention, I feel like. With AI, it's such an easy horror story to tell. China will have a superhuman intelligence that can do whatever it wants and we can't stop it. So it's harder to visualize that, I feel like, for quantum. I've heard this bandied about, what will quantum's ChatGPT moment be, I argue it's when we have proven advantage in something, that's useful. And we might have that technically if you look at the D-Wave paper. So I just feel like that needs to be translated for those folks who are kind of outside looking in. That's why AI is capturing everyone's imagination on these hearings so easily, because you don't have to be a tech expert.
I think quantum feels sort of somewhere in between something like AI, where, maybe there will be some application that suddenly puts quantum in everybody's hands in a way that they understand that this is quantum that I'm using. Otherwise, it may be behind the curtain in a sense and enabling everything from, precision navigation or brain imaging or whatever. And they don't even realize it's because of quantum, which reminds me, I came from experience on the government side, managing the National Nanotechnology Initiative, on which the quantum initiative is sort of modeled in many ways. And nanotech was held out as being this thing that was going to be really amazing and would be sort of the industry of the future. And instead, it diffused into everything. Nanoparticles are in medicine and nanomaterials are helping make better coatings or whatever. And it's the sort of nano part is lost to the consumer. And I occasionally have people say to me, that nano thing didn't work out very well, did it? And it's like, no, it's everywhere. And it's actually the foundation, that ability to control matter at the nanoscale for quantum in many ways. So I sort of see quantum as being maybe somewhere in between nano and AI.
One last point on the whole fear angle. Nano made a nice big comeback during the pandemic, didn't it? Because all of a sudden everyone believed that a vial of a vaccine contained a robot in it that entered your body. So, I mean, fear is pretty powerful when people don't understand technology. Yeah, that was pretty comical stuff. Now, moving on to one of the other reports. This one should be of interest to just about anyone interested in quantum, and that's this whole idea of a global quantum computing forecast. So if you want to give us the highlight of what that's about first.
Yeah. So this is a report that came out at the end of March. It's the State of the Global Quantum Industry. It's the first edition. It's something that we thought about very carefully so that we would identify some measures of the quantum economy that we could longitudinally continue to evaluate and update, probably on an annual basis or so, in order to watch the advancements in the field. And one of the reasons that we wanted to do this was because a lot of times when you're talking to somebody who's a little bit outside the quantum bubble, they say, oh, I think I've heard about this quantum thing and it's going to be amazing, but it's way in the future. And so, I'm just, waiting for the happy day when I have my quantum whatever. And we wanted to explain, especially to policymakers, that there is a quantum economy today. There are good paying jobs in your state. There are products and businesses today. And one of the ways that we did that was by putting out this report, which gives some, data-based statistics on the numbers of companies, the numbers of jobs, the number of patents, the investments that are being made. And it's kind of a very infographic presentation that's easy to grasp, hopefully. It's not technical at all. And, hopefully it's a good way to track progress going forward. So stay tuned for annual reports like this.
Oh, nice. And the numbers look pretty good. So I believe they're expecting it to go from about $1 billion to $2.2 billion by 2027, right?
So those were, So we've been doing, this was the fifth year actually of an assessment that we've done annually on the quantum computing market. And that's a survey-based assessment that we do in partnership with Hyperion Research. And based on survey responses, we have been tracking the quantum computing market, and it's been steadily growing, roughly 25, 27% annual growth rate over the last 5 years. And that, again, you can see the sort of histograms in this report. And what's interesting is the actual numbers that companies report for this year, because, we ask each year for them, what were your revenues in the previous year and what do you think they're going to be like in the next couple of years? And when you look at those results, the actuals are always higher, have been at least, than the estimates that they gave the year before. So growth has been outpacing the, you could say, conservative estimates of the industry itself. And I will just remind everyone that while we're seeing nice growth of the revenues, these are still not profitable enterprises. The amount that is being spent in order to generate that revenue is still not in the black. Maybe for some suppliers of, equipment or something, it's harder to measure. But this is really the quantum computing market. And on our site, I think we have the more detailed report as well as the part that's in the State of the Industry report, where it breaks down a lot of other information that we gather with regard to, are you expecting that the quantum computing is going to be accessed via the cloud or via enterprise on-prem installations? What are the sectors that are most likely to use quantum computing first, et cetera? So there's a lot of interesting detail that I think would be of very high interest, not only to policymakers and others who are kind of tracking this, but also investors, of course, who want to know, where is this thing headed? So that was the main piece of the revenue in the market that we reported. The other piece was a first report that we did on the quantum sensing market, which was smaller than the quantum computing market, but was also growing at a similar pace and had its own sort of set of questions and some interesting details behind that as well.
Before we get to the sensing, one thing that really jumped out at me in this report was the whole on-prem versus cloud thing that you just touched on. It seemed high to me, the idea that like 46% of the business might be coming from on-prem, that just almost seems crazy to me, because like quantum computers get outdated really, really, really quickly. One qubit, boom, you just double the power. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around that. Like, until these machines can be doing incredible things, bleeding edge, and you lock them away in a basement for a reason, like, I just can't understand why anyone would want one.
Yeah, I know. I think, and I don't have the, I do actually have it here somewhere in front of me, but just trying to remember, I have a bullet that I did pull up where I noted that access via the cloud is still dominant at about 38%, but on-prem is growing and up to 27%. So it's still about a third or more via the cloud and about a quarter on-prem. Now that, I think, and this is what I wanted to
It was a projection, I think, by 2027.
It was a projection, that's right. So they were talking about,
I meant, the projection by 2027.
In 2028 or something, they expected that the on-prem versus the cloud. I'm not sure why exactly that was the target date, but so it is a little bit in the future.
Yeah, it almost seems hard to believe. And then are there quantum winter concerns? So
that question we've asked every year, and the responses this year were somewhat inconsistent with the results of the rest of the survey. So I would say there was a slight increase in the number of people who felt that a quantum winter, which was defined as more than 25% drop in funding or investments or something, was likely or somewhat likely. But all the other indicators of number of venture capital deals and investments by the governments, public, was all, sort of positive. So I'm not sure where this fear of a pullback from investments is coming from when the evidence, the data, seem to contradict it. So I don't know what the sort of gut response is to that question necessarily, and why some of the respondents seemed more, conservative about it. It could just be some of these externalities that we're seeing. We did the survey, just for context, in the new year, but very early in 2025.
Okay.
So that
Before
would be the
we had
snapshot
tariffs
time.
and other things freaking people out, right? So
yeah, probably was not informed so much or influenced by that.
Yeah. If you did this survey today, I think you'd get some different answers. People are like, well, I'm not spending on anything at all. It's quite possible. Okay, so let's switch back now to sensors, which are becoming important. You can argue that these are the things that actually sell in the world, right? If you were buying something physical, very few people were buying quantum computers, but quantum sensing is going to start popping up just about everywhere. So what were the top line items of sensing?
Well, as I said, the market numbers are steadily increasing about 25% per year. In 2024, the survey-based estimate was 375 million revenues. And then based on the growth figures by 2028, so for this one, we looked out a total of 5 years, it would be around 900 million. This was based on responses from 67 different companies. So just to give you sort of a sense of the scope, I mean, it's hard to be statistical with these numbers, but we had a pretty good cross section, and we do reach out not just across the U.S. but across the world to the extent we are able to. And one of the questions had to do with what sectors were going to be the early users of quantum sensors, and the response there had number one, aerospace, and number two was sort of the life sciences, pharma combined. So that aerospace was around 23% and of the respondents, I guess, and biosciences and pharma 18%, but quite distributed actually. So there's a lot of, and that's something that's generally true, I think, about sensing markets. It goes into automotive, or it goes into some space platform where they'll pay a premium. You've got such a diversity of requirements and price points and incumbent technologies that you're competing against. So it's a very fragmented ecosystem, really.
Yeah. So with the sensing, aerospace being first makes a lot of sense, right? I don't mean to misuse the word sense there, but yeah, it really does. You've got like the GPS stuff, the replacements for GPS. You've got all that kind of technology. Military does tend to spend on things first, definitely. Do you see that continuing? Do you see government dominance continuing in sensing like that? Or do you see like some other industries surprising us? Do you think like oil and gas might all of a sudden pop up as like a big, strong contender?
Well, a couple of sort of data points to reference. One is there is a QED-C study that was done a couple years ago now on use cases of quantum sensors for X, and X was quite broad and diverse. So you can see in that report a range of use cases or applications of quantum sensing. And there's an interesting chart in that report that shows the impact of these different sensors. The chart shows on the x-axis the sort of technology readiness or maturity of the particular sensor. And on the y-axis, one of the charts shows impact in government customer areas, and the other one shows impact in commercial areas. So same sensor, some kind of magnetic sensor or something like that. And then you can kind of see which of those kinds of customers or markets looks like it's going to be most important. And they're different. So I think it depends on the sensor, which, whether a commercial or a government application is likely to be kind of dominant, at least initially. Government often is, willing to pay the engineering costs and be an early customer for things if it meets their needs. And we're probably going to see that. In fact, the Defense Innovation Unit, a part of the Defense Department, has made some investments in quantum sensors. And their purpose is to accelerate deployment as quickly as possible. So that's sort of a signal, I would say, that there are some military applications that are near term and that they're trying to accelerate. There's also some investment in DARPA, which is more early stage in a way than what DIU's mission is. And DARPA has recently called for proposals for what they call robust quantum sensors. And they put some pretty ambitious targets because, of course, some of the military uses, they have to sustain environments that are pretty rugged. And so there's a lot of interest, clearly, in using quantum sensors for various defense-related applications. But we did a separate study on quantum sensors for biomedical imaging. And there was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement about the applications of quantum sensors in biomedicine, and in particular for imaging. And there are some companies that are doing clinical trials already, and they have the potential, for instance, for replacing these magnetoencephalography machines that are huge. They have cryogenic detectors that you have to sort of sit under as a patient. You can't move for a long period of time, and it has to be in a shielded room because any external electronic signals or magnetic fields, is a problem for getting a good image. And quantum sensors allow, you don't have to have this big cryogenic, surrounding system. You don't have to shield it from the environment necessarily. So there's some real advantages. And you can make it into something that's more like a bicycle helmet. So you can actually have the patient be able to move. And if it's a child, that's an advantage. If it's something that you want to study when a person can do some activity, that's an advantage. So there's a lot of real advantages for these quantum sensors in biomedicine that are already being explored. So that's a pretty big market, I think. There's some, of course, interesting hurdles that you have to clear when you're doing biomedical technologies in regulations and, getting insurers on board with it. And a lot of other kind of, things on the critical path there.
Yeah, the biotech stuff makes me nervous. It's like, ooh, we have an advancement. See it in 10 years. Got to clear regulators. Yeah, it's like, but I feel like this year we're going to see a couple things, right? I think we're going to see more sensing appearing everywhere. People are going to see that it's quantum. They won't know what it means, but they'll see it, and it'll just make it more tangible to them. Like, oh, this stuff's real. It's real in the world. And in my gut, I just feel like 2025 by its end will be an amazing year because of passing that 50 qubit barrier. I think we're going to have 50 logical qubits by multiple vendors this year. And I just think that'll do something to the whole psyche of the industry. This idea that we have something
there's,
new.
There's a lot of focus, of course, on numbers of qubits. I will just remind everyone that
logical
we also need, logical, but scaling up the hardware is absolutely a critical part of getting to a general purpose fault tolerant quantum computer. We also are going to need error correction. And then in the end of the day, we're going to need algorithms to run on them. And so there's sort of our three. Accomplishing only one or two of those three is not sufficient. You have to get all three. And so we need work going on in all three.
Yes, absolutely. I just meant that now that we'll have this new entity this year, this new computing thing that we never had before, like we could simulate up to 50 qubits or so with a really powerful machine. But once you pass that barrier, it's uncharted territory. That's super exciting. And I got to believe that next year's surveys, after enough headlines, you've seen this a few times now, around December into January, we get these kind of amazing headlines, right? That's just like the nature of the beast. We're talking about, Google and proving the multiverse, or how that paper has been misinterpreted, how that works, misinterpreted. And you get all these amazing headlines. So I just got to feel that this year's big December Q2B timeframe of headlines is going to be, here we are. We've broken the simulation barrier, and now we've got more qubits.
It's like breaking the sound barrier or something.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's something new, and I just feel like that's going to have some exciting ripple effect in the industry.
And to the whole question, I always say the most frequently asked question that I get is, what's it going to be good for? And the answer is science first. You're going to scientists, you give them a new tool and they are going to go use it. And it's going to take probably a little longer to get those real business applications that's a different kind of customer. And, they have different sort of puts and takes and willingness to make those investments, to port things and, adopt something new. So scientists, though, they're very agile in a way. And so I think we'll see those first customers in the labs, like you say, 2026 or so.
Yeah, I agree. And to all those companies offering quantum services, be kind and give a discount to scientists, because they're not going to have that much money by the time.
Okay. Now I will get on one of my soapboxes, because one of the things QED-C did kind of early on in partnership with the members was develop an idea for this program we had a clever acronym, QUEST, Quantum User Expansion for Science and Technology. And we took it to the folks in Congress and we said, you should fund this. And the idea was that a little bit of the money for quantum was going to go into this program that would go to, people could propose to it, get some money to go use a quantum computer. And the idea was that it would be that discount, right? It would be like the government will give you the funding to go use IBM or IonQ or whatever. That way, the companies would get a little bit more revenue, and the researchers would get access to the latest and greatest via the cloud, presumably, and students would, get hands-on kind of learnings. And so it would be a win-win-win. And it got authorized, but never appropriated, or at least not yet. So that seems to me pretty low-hanging fruit to help, like you say, get as many researchers as possible having access to current technology. So hopefully that will get funded.
Yeah, I hope so too. And on the topic of funding and everything, I made the little joke before, of course, about code post-quantum world, but in reality, joining QED-C comes at like different levels. So how low down how low down in tiers can you get? Like, just for listeners, can you be a student and join? Can you be, So our memberships are generally at the organizational level, and we do have university memberships.
And there are some programs that engage students. Not all of the programs are available to them, but I will say that the companies are especially interested in meeting students and, connecting with the students. And so we continue to look for ways to do that. If we have a meeting in Chicago, for instance, we'll have a student poster session with students from the local universities. We have had some programs where there's mentoring by industry people for students. So I would say our university engagement is more at the student level than it is at the faculty level in some ways, although we would like to expand it on both fronts.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. So folks can check out the show notes for information on how to learn more about QED-C, and also the publications that we discussed today. So we'll be looking out for Celia in future uncomfortable meetings with Congress and on TV. Yeah. No, but she's always ready for the answers, so that's good.
Well, to the extent that your audience is in Washington, D.C., we are planning to do what we call a quantum technology showcase on Capitol Hill, July 17th. And anybody, it's the people's house. You can go to Congress, and we'll be there with companies. And the only requirement that we have for our members who want to exhibit is that they have something physical to show that quantum is real. And the congressional staff and people who work up there on Capitol Hill who don't know much about quantum are free to come by and check it out. So, but it's open to the public, and we look forward to showcasing what's happening in quantum today and raising awareness among our policymakers and continuing to get a lot of momentum for support for this important emerging area.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, maybe I'll hop on a train. I live in New York City. Maybe I'll hop on a train and come on down. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
That does it for this episode. Thanks to Celia Merzbacher for joining to discuss QED-C's latest research on the quantum industry. And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe to Protiviti's The Post-Quantum World and maybe leave a review to help others find us. Be sure to follow me on all socials at Constant Hacker. That's Constant with a K, Hacker. You'll find links there to what we're doing in quantum computing services at Protiviti. You can also DM me questions or suggestions for what you'd like to hear on the show. For more information on our quantum services, check out Protiviti.com or follow Protiviti Tech on X and LinkedIn. Until next time, be kind and stay quantum curious.